All right, guys, welcome back to another edition of The Better Contractor. Today, I am joined again by Tucker Willms with Arrow Valley. Hey, Tucker.
Hey, man.
And Travis. I'm not going to do a nickname for you today, Travis. I don't like the T-Raz. I gotta think about this.
It makes me think of toasted ravioli.
Exactly, but it kind of Tucker's like, yeah.
Yeah.
It makes me extra delicious.
So we definitely got to come up with one for you, though. But Travis, thank you for joining today.
Always a pleasure.
So today, we're going to talk a little bit more about being the leader that people need. So again, this can be inside of your company. It can be inside of your family. There's so many areas. Leadership is not just a leader of a company, the CEO of a company. All of us are leaders in some aspect, to the circle that's around us, to our family, to coworkers or whatever. But being the leader that people need, and then what are the qualities of an effective leader? So I kind of wrote a few things down to kind of just kick us off, but actually caring about your people. There's a lot of leaders today that they come across as really only self-serving. Like, I'm doing this for myself to either climb the ladder at this corporation, or I am doing this for myself to grow my company. And while that is important, because you have to grow your company, you need to actually care about your people. And that's what will build that culture. That's what will get people to stay, that people will want to actually work and perform for you. Demand more from people and stop being afraid to be honest. I see so many people who are afraid to actually demand excellence, demand more. And I see so many people who are afraid to have those honest conversations. Now, the honest conversations does not mean go be a complete butt to someone. That's not what that means. But it means if somebody is failing, that you're not afraid to have an open and direct but respectful conversation. And there's some emotional intelligence and some learning as a leader that you should be doing on how to have that conversation. Being a vision setter. As the leader in your family, as you're at work, if you aren't setting a vision, then you're not really being a leader. Your goal should be to set a vision for the family or your group or your company. Be the example for others. I still think one of the best ways to lead is by example, because at the end of the day, as a leader, you have to get buy-in. And if you're not getting buy-in from your people, you can say all day long what you want to have accomplished and what to have them do. But if they don't think that you will do it yourself, or if they don't respect you because you aren't living life a certain way, then they're probably not going to follow you very far. They'll follow you until they find a new job, or whatever. But you got to be that example for others, and then be outspoken on what matters, what needs to be done, and then take action. I see a lot of people that don't do that part either, or they're not taking action on that vision, or they're not setting out the goals to get there. So anyway, just to kind of start this off and start the creative juices flowing. So I was kind of curious, like, have you guys had a leader in your life that like really, really stood out? And if so, what was some traits, what were some things that they stood out differently than others to you?
I would go to consistency. You always knew what you're going to get from them. It wasn't an emotional roller coaster. How you go into them, at least how they would respond emotionally, and usually with sound judgment, but never having to wonder, is this a bad time to come to them type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, that was something big that stood out to me.
Yeah, I like that point. There's one of I'm trying to remember which one it is, on the Better Contractor, on the leadership portion, where it talks a little bit about that. And it's having the EQ, emotional intelligence portion, as a leader, to where in the moment of conflict or in the moment of a disaster or something bad having happened, you see this a lot in like military type environments, but it's also the same thing in a business environment. You should be the person that has a little bit of resolve, that is a little bit steady, in those times of stress, and that can calmly bring people to a point of comfort, even though they know there's something bad happening right now and we got to work through it. But bringing that down to a level and then being conscious about, hey, this is how we're going to get through this now. As a group, there is a solution, there is a path forward, and calmly communicating that. Because like you said, I see a lot of people, their first reaction is emotion, which is fine. internally, but you can't as a leader immediately let that be what you lead with, because then you're going to create chaos with all the people that are watching you for, hey, what's going on right now, or what are we doing? They're looking to you, and if you look like you're a wreck, you're going to create a lot of chaos in your organization. So I do like that one, but that goes to even just daily stuff. Like, do you bring, the stuff from home to work every day? If the answer is yes, you're probably going to be a slightly chaotic leader that people don't know. Hey, am I getting Tucker number one today or Tucker number two today? I don't really know which one's coming to work. Um, yeah, so you want to be someone who has figured out a little bit of that EQ and who can lead with the logic versus, not that emotion doesn't matter, it does, but you need to lead with the logic.
Gosh, an example in my life, I think the earliest point I remember really having to focus on this exactly was, I don't know, middle school football. I was the quarterback at the time. The football coach we had, Coach Bradley, he was amazing. I mean, he was just one of those guys that, Coach Prime and Deion Sanders, he says, send me your boys and I'll send you back men. That was kind of how Coach Bradley was. And I remember this game, I had thrown my fourth interception of the game. And so to say it was a bad game for me was an understatement. And I came back to the sideline crying. I was so mad at myself. Not like, it was a pity party for myself. And he grabbed me by the face mask and dragged me down to the sideline away from everybody else and got 2 inches from me. And he said, if you continue to act like this, I don't want you on my sideline. He said, because you are setting the tone for the rest of the team. Your emotions dictate everyone else that's under you and following you. He said, so get it together. And then from then on, it really clicked. Hey, I can't be in my own head. All these guys are feeding off of me. So young age, that hit home. And ever since then, it's been big for me.
Yeah, I love that. And people, you don't realize, and that, that's a sports environment there, but it is so true, especially in leadership, but not even just in leadership, but your mental state and how you're acting, that does play into your team's
Oh,
mindset a
gosh.
bunch.
Yeah, yeah.
You especially see it in sports because you can just visually watch all of the people. But
Yeah.
yeah,
No, but that's true in literally everything. I mean, if you're leading an organization and you're a wreck, the people underneath you, even if they're not a wreck, they're going to think they should be, or like, what is going on? So,
yeah, yeah,
I mean, emotions are impactful. So I mean, your the logic kind of comes maybe behind the emotion that you portray, in that, for better or worse, in the sense that your emotions will translate to the people with what you're saying. So if you're crying, upset, fear resonates, fear spreads, so does
sure.
confidence.
I think Tucker probably knows this one, but one of my favorite podcasts is Ed Milet's, and he has a saying. I probably butchered it just a little bit, but basically that your emotions should comment and logic should command. So when something happens, your logic is what should be commanding your actions, and the emotions should be in the background providing a commentary. Because at the end of the day, we are dealing with other people, so you can't be emotionless, but you got to kind of use the logic first, let the emotions have some comment, but don't let them be what you lead with. And I
Right.
think looking at one of the points here, the genuine care for people. So I've always kind of viewed as a leader when it comes to the work, the vision, when it's chaotic, when poo hits the fan, whatever, that is when you have to lead with that logic. When you can lead with some of the emotion, I think, is when you're having maybe a one on one moment with someone and you're wanting to connect. That is, to me, that's when that emotion comes in. Not too much, but that's where you can actually have that human connection where you get to know that individual a little bit more and they actually feel like, you know what, we're not just work only.
Hmm.
This leader actually cares about my personal life, about my family, about my goals, my interests in life. Is not just about them. So I think we can kind of tie that into that genuine care for people by using the emotion a little bit more on that side. But in the work environment of just we're getting stuff done, we're accomplishing the goals we set forth, then that really needs to be a lot more of the logic and the visionary and the person who's strategizing how to get to a certain point.
People think so. I know I've had good and bad leaders all throughout my career, and the ones that you genuinely know care about you, and you can see it in their teams too, where they care about their people, at a personal level. They care about who they are at work as well as outside. They genuinely care about them as a human. Creates that culture, that familial aspect where it's then reciprocated too. But if it's not genuine, people see it, and if people think, hey, I'll do this little checklist and ask, hey, how's the family? Okay, good, cool, cool. All right, so here's what they think that the superficial component of checking the box of like, I'm feigning that I care about you, and that it's covered up in that people won't see through that. People do. People see your genuineness, regardless of how good of acting you perform. People will see it, and you think you're getting away with it, and you're not. And but all those organizations, people will do way more for those they care about, they love, they share common interest, they share common care with. And those teams that you really see high performing, there's typically an element of that where it's a brotherhood. They care about each other beyond just whatever tasks in front of them, and typically that's always from the leader down. And that oftentimes is a differentiation between a lot of the high performing teams, regardless of the industry.
It really is. And I think hiring people that, so like as your team gets more complex or larger, for the leader at the top, it becomes a little bit more difficult for that to flow all the way through to the end. And I think, for companies of that size, then it becomes even more critical that as you're promoting, you're hiring people for that, whatever management leadership position, that they're people that also exhibit those characteristics. So I see a lot of companies, and I've been guilty of this at times as well, promoting people into a position because they're good at a lot of things, but they're not necessarily good at that connection level. So even though like I view myself decent at that, the team that I directly supervise, for the most part, we're a pretty tight knit group that gets along. We can go do dinner. Like I know the family, I know the kids, like, and we care deeply about them. Like we lost one this past year, and it was tough on the whole team because it was like a family member had passed. You know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
we still stay in contact with people, related to it, and because we actually cared. If we didn't care, it'd be, we'll rehire and move on. But that's not what it was. And I look at like, our management staff, at work, and it's so much different now than it was like at a job I had previously worked before I started Atlanta Corp. There was none of that there. Like I felt like people came and went. Nobody really felt a connection to anybody. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that does completely change that culture. Yeah, having that genuine care, and like Travis said, people will see through that. If it's not genuine and it looks like you're just checking a box, people's going to pick up on it. And in this environment with a super, super competitive labor market, people don't want to work at that company. And guess what? They don't have to anymore. So if you're a company or a business owner listening to this and you don't have that part figured out and your employee retention is terrible, you might want to look inward a little bit and see how you can do better at connecting with people genuinely.
And it's truly caring about them. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not a technique.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's truly seeing your people as human. And the work environment that you create for them, if it's a positive one that's uplit, will impact their home life. They will
Mm-hmm.
Oh
take
yeah.
they will take a bad work environment and a bad experience home with them that will impact the relationships outside of work, which then
Mm-hmm.
potentially spirals that into a negative experience, which then it's this reciprocal thing where they bring it back to work with them the next day.
Mm-hmm.
So it can have this spiraling effect of downward returns or just a negative environment. But yeah, you way impact just because it's a job and you're the boss, you impact way beyond that. And that can have cascading effects in their career or in other things. So, yeah, don't underestimate the value that one person has, even though it's maybe a business relationship. You have impact way beyond that on the lives, and you even take it beyond that. The wife, maybe the wife had, or if it was a boy or a girl or a man or a woman in your employee, when they take it home, their spouse, that and they take a negative attitude environment back home, that impacts not only your employee but then their spouse, and their spouse takes that, and maybe that transfers over to the kids, and if they have kids and the kids have a bad day at school, and they're like just yeah, you have a huge responsibility. Care about your people. I mean, whether you see it
Yeah.
for that or not, You do have a
That kind of
responsibility.
takes me to my next point very well, Travis, which is being the example. So a lot of people will think in a business setting that being the example basically means, let's say you're a landscape company. So being the example would be, I'm getting out there with my people and doing the work with them. I see a lot of people that think that is what that means. That's a part of it, but that is not all of it. So to me, being the example, and it goes back to true leadership, you should be being the example as a human being, how you treat others. So how you treat the customer when they're there, how you treat the other crew members, the respect that you give people, um, how you live your life. So if you're like a traveling crew, which a lot of ours Atlanta corporate traveling crews, so they stay the night in a hotel somewhere. Are what kind of life are you living after hours? Are you living an example life then, or are
Mhm.
you a completely different person when the clock's turned off? So how do you treat your wife and kids? When you're traveling like that? Are you having an affair or are you actually being faithful to your wife? So there's all these different things that this being an example actually means. And I think when you're the leader that actually lives a life that other people want to follow, you gain so much respect just by that action that you can actually lead them in ways that other people can never could. So I want to challenge some of you, like being the example again doesn't just mean I go do the work with you. It means that I am a person that is living a life worthy of your respect. So that's to me is what that actually means. I see Tucker. I see your juices flowing there, man.
Oh yeah, man.
Elaborate a little on that.
Yeah, I think it's a whole 360 approach to how you live. It's like you can't just be the guy at work that has great ideas and you motivate them in the morning before they go off to their job sites. It's got to be they've got to see. I mean, we've talked about fitness before. They've got to see it on the fitness side. They got to see it on your relationship side, the way you treat your wife. They got to see it how you're involved in the community. They got to see it how you treat clients whenever they got to see it all over. They really need to see how you respond in bad situations, like I talked about it in the beginning. I don't think you can be I don't think you can be failing in one area and still be somebody that your team should be looking up to. Or you know what I mean? I mean, yeah, they'll look up to you, but not to your fullest potential. So I think it matters everything you do.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think listening back to the last podcast that we shot with you, Tucker, we talked about making an impact. So that
Yeah,
goes back to the same point, being the example. You should be making an impact as a leader of your group that they are actually a better spouse at home. Maybe they actually are taking fitness seriously now because of your example. Maybe they're a better father or mother because of your example or how you treat others. Maybe they decided to mentor, a kid or a teen or another adult because of the impact they saw that you made on someone else. So it's being, an example and a leader in that regard where you're elevating people just because of the life that you're living.
gosh, that is like my number one goal. If I don't even care about landscaping that much, in the sense of I would if I can have everyone on our team go home and be a better version of themselves for their families, then I've succeeded. Like
Mm,
if I know that they're having a better home life, because not necessarily just because they're getting paid more, but because their mental state's better, because they're seeing what it looks like to be a leader, to keep your word, to work hard, all of those things. If they're taking that home with them, I mean that is why I do it. Like I want to build a company, a premium brand that attracts premium talent, that pays our guys a premium price, but then that they have pride in everything they do, including their relationships, and so they're just
mm.
all around great people.
Finances and money have to be there when they have to pay for
Yeah.
bills and create the quality of life for their. If it's in disarray, it's going to manifest in different ways. But you create that type of environment where you're building those people up. I think it'd be hard pressed to say that that's not going to materialize in the business where the
Mhm.
clients are happier, the work product is better,
Mhm.
the team's more working more efficiently, you're making more money, the brand and the reputation. So that almost foundational can lead to everything else too. And without that,
Exactly.
it will be really tough to create that profitable business where the ethical, the leadership, the character, the environment is cancerous or deteriorating. That's the foundation essentially. That it will be
Mhm.
really tough to build something on top of it. Where you build that foundation, the rest of it likely will come.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think tying to that, one of our other points with this was being a vision setter. So being the example people look up to, but then also realizing inside of your family or inside of, especially at work, most people want to be a part of something that is growing, that is getting better, that is getting bigger. They want to be a part of a more of like a movement.
Mhm.
So, I think the other part of being an effective leader is also being one who can set a vision in a way that inspires other people. And inside of that vision, going back to something Ed Milet had said earlier, you need to be able to set a vision that's so big that your people's visions can fit inside of it on a corporate level. So if you're setting a really small vision and everybody's like, so I'm pretty much capped out where I'm at, then basically is what you're telling me. You shouldn't be setting those type of vision. Now you can't set a false vision. It needs to actually be something you can accomplish and you plan to accomplish. But you need to be able to set a vision, but then you got to be the leader that actually gets it done. So if you just are constantly setting visions all day long, but at the end of the day, everybody's like, yeah, I set one last year too, and we didn't hit any of it, then you become a bad leader because people don't trust you
Mhm.
to actually see it through.
Sure.
So you got to set a vision and then actually execute on that vision, hold people accountable to it. But I think that vision setting is a crucial part of all of that as well.
And the vision setting motivates me to be a better version of myself because I'll set these visions. And quite frankly, I'm not sure I do a great job. I know I don't at sharing everything that's in my head with the team of where the business is going. I know they can see we're blowing up with growth. They can see we're expanding and doing great things. But in my head, it's 100 times more than what I've said. And so that's on me. But where I'm going with this is I think, gosh, I think if they could see what I see, which is my job to show them, they would be even more motivated than they are right now, just to be better themselves. And like that drives me because if I'm not living up to the person I need to be to get the company to where it needs to be, then they'll never achieve their potential through the company. So it pushes me when I set these big goals to better myself, to be that person for other people because whether this is an internal problem or not, I don't know. But like, I need an external weight pushing on me to make myself better. And so, if I can tie that to other people's success, I'll skyrocket. And so, that's
Yeah,
what I've been trying to do.
I like that. And it's kind of building a culture of achievement too, within your
Right.
organization or the people around you. So, and that's personally and professionally. So
Right.
if you're constantly pushing that, hey, we're going to get better at work, we're going to get better in our fitness, we're going to get better in all these different areas. If you can build a culture around that where everybody's kind of holding each other accountable to an extent, and
Yeah.
everybody's building up, that's where your culture comes from, inside of anything,
Right.
an organization, your family, whatever.
Right.
That's where that culture of greatness comes from, is having a leader that's pushing that culture, then having all these people all of a sudden start to become more competitive, that, hey,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to get to this level and we're going to hold each other accountable. Which
Right.
then kind of goes into we talked earlier about being transparent and honest, as
Mm-hmm.
a leader. And that's something I've seen inside of our organization, other organizations, where some people just have a tough time with those honest conversations. But you need to be real with yourself that as a leader, you're not only there to motivate, to set a vision for all the good side, you're also there when someone's failing, you owe it to your team to either bring that person up or
Mm-hmm.
remove that person from the team. Because
Absolutely right.
otherwise, if you don't, that's going to be a cancer inside that team. And all of a sudden, that culture of achievement and all of that will start to suffer a lot. So, having those direct conversations and open conversations is something probably for some people that's the toughest part of leadership or management, is having those conversations. And I would challenge you on that to actually try to find books, read, self improve upon that, because there is a way to do it. If
Mm-hmm.
the person completely is like they did something that's so just terrible and there's really no coming back, then you just need to remove them. But that's normally not the case with most people. Most people, it was something that gradually built up to a certain level. They got a bad thing in their mind. They got a little animosity against another employee or whatever it is that someone didn't deal with along the way. Like people knew their mindset was changing, but they allowed it to get to a level 8 instead of realizing at level 2 or 3 and then saying, "Hey, Tucker, come here a second. Let's talk about this." But there's a proper way to pull that person aside out of respect,
Mm-hmm.
to have that conversation with them where you actually help that person. A lot of times, depending on the situation, it's obviously depends on the situation. But if you can go to them and say, hey, I know from the last time we met, these are the goals that you had for yourself, professionally, personally, whatever it is. And as your leader and as someone I hope that you respect, I need to have an honest conversation with you and say you're a little bit off track. And I care
That's
about
great.
you. If I didn't care about you, I would just let you do it and I'll find somebody
Sure.
else to replace you. But I actually care about you. So I'm having
Mhm.
this tough conversation with you. And call it out and then follow it up with what can I, as your leader, do for you to help get this back on track because I want to see you succeed. That is a completely different way to deal with that situation than what some people think it embodies. It doesn't mean don't pull the person aside and call them out in front of the whole group and
Right.
saying, hey, you pretty much suck right now. You got to get your stuff together.
Hmm.
That's a completely different way because it doesn't show you, number one, you care about them. You called them out in front of people. You disrespected them. So there's a
Hmm.
right and a wrong way to do it. But I think leaders have to be able to have those conversations, be comfortable with them, and excel at giving them. And when you can do that, then you also are building even more respect and trust with your group because they know, hey, he's not just the fluffy leader. He
Yeah.
will hold me accountable. He does have a standard. And if I don't meet it, then we're going to have a one on one conversation. And I
Right.
think that's hugely important. That's something a lot of people are not comfortable with, but you got to get comfortable with it.
Right. I couldn't agree more. Man, I just want to brag on two of our guys from yesterday. I was at the job site doing a job walk and talking about accountability this plays in. Uh, there was an issue on the current job we were on, not a big one at all, just a very small one. But the leader of the foreman of the crew, I asked him about the issue and he brought it up to me. He's like, I take full responsibility for this. It was my mistake. And he said, we fixed it by doing this. And then I brought up another issue from a job, the previous, or a very small one, but still a job on the previous issue. And we recently had one guy take another job. And usually the issue that we had was usually that guy's job. And so I expected them to blame it on this the guy that left, but another guy on the crew piped up and said, "No, it wasn't him. It was my mistake. I was the one who did that." And just right there, that made me probably more proud than than I realized it would, because that guy took accountability for something that he very easily could have passed off, and I would have never known. And it's just knowing that those guys on our team going to be cultivating the new guys that are coming in is just it's priceless.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's a huge part of the honesty and transparency, too, is also fessing
Yeah,
up. It's like, hey,
yeah,
I thought this
yeah,
was right. I
yeah.
messed up and I owe it to you guys. I owe an apology to you guys.
Sure.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's huge. But another point of what you just said though too is you're utilizing so training obviously can encompass me doing the training or someone else doing the training, but it also can encompass what you just said where you've created a culture that's strong enough now to where your people are honestly doing a little bit of the training for the new hire anyway
Yeah.
by culture. So they're saying,
Yeah.
saying hey, we have an expectation, we have a code, we have a standard,
Right.
and this is what it looks like to work on our job site. This is what it looks like, and that's training. Whether you know it, whether you think it is or not, that is training.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Very important.
Yeah. So being outspoken on what matters. I think we talked a little bit before we started recording about the people's like I'm gonna be honest with you when really all they're doing there is just basically saying I'm getting ready to be a butthole to you, and I'm letting you
Yeah.
know up front. That's not what we want. Like
Yeah.
when we talk about being outspoken and honest. Um, Again, you've got to have the emotional intelligence when you deal with a group of people. So don't be that dude, which I'm not saying
Yeah.
that was, but I did my nose to make sure we clarify between the two because there's so much of that out there where people are used to saying that, and people's like,
Okay.
okay, he just gave himself permission to basically tell me off. So
Yeah.
this will
Yeah.
be fun.
So another thing, like whenever I'm thinking of, a lot of companies have core values. I've struggled. We have core values, but I've struggled with like what to include in them. And I heard a quote, I don't remember where it was or YouTube somewhere, I'm sure. The guy said, "Your values are what you're willing to lose money over." And it stuck with me. I mean, it's like, okay, every single one of the core values that we have, are we'd lose money over them for sure, to make sure that they're right. But just going into teaching your guys, teaching your team, it's like, what is the most important thing? And then if it really is, like, you would be willing to lose money over if it came down to lose money or not follow through with it. So I think that's been huge. Just that little phrase. Your values are what you're willing to lose money over.
Yeah, I
It's
like that one.
huge.
I've not really heard one quite like that. I know internally we've always kind of practiced that you basically make your decisions by those. So you hire, you fire. If you're
Sure.
getting ready to make kind of a tough decision, you make sure it
Yeah.
follows your core values. And I know how we kind of picked them was we looked back when the company was at its infantile stage and it blew up.
Hmm.
What were some of the things that made it what it was at that time?
Hmm. Yeah.
Because at that time it was me and like one or two other people, but it had such success early on, and it's like, well, what was that attributed to? Well, for us, it was being people of our word. So if we messed
Yeah.
up on a job, even though I didn't have any money at the time, we did our
Yeah.
darndest to make that right. Even if it
Exactly.
meant we went in the hole, and we didn't have the money to
Exactly.
go in the hole back then.
Yeah.
Um, and it was being honest. So if I told you, hey, I'm going to get you a quote tomorrow by 5, guess
Yeah.
what? I'm getting you a quote tomorrow by 5. I'm not going to be that company that's like, the very next
Yeah.
day, like, hey, you forgot to send me that quote last night. Oh, shoot. Yeah, I forgot. I'll get it to you. We
Yeah.
want to be people of our word on everything, whether that's we're showing up minus a weather issue or equipment issue. We're going to be there. We're going to do the job. We're going to do it per the scope of work. Anyway, getting a little bit off tangent, but I think that's important though, that your core
Hmm.
value should play into this too, because again, that goes back to the respect. Your core value
Yeah.
should be something that you're living, and then you live that in front of your people, thus the respect, but you're also building that culture of achievement and that culture around those core values.
Yeah. Like it goes over into training and culture on the team. Like one of, I mean, this isn't the way we word it, but one of our core values essentially, we're going to do it right, no matter how long it takes or what it takes. We're not going to cut corners because a lot of things that we build and do, there's a lot of ways to cut corners underground and behind things that you would never see until it's an issue and the thing's failing. And so we've vowed we're never going to cut corners in that regard. And sometimes, since we're still so young and since in the business, it wasn't bid totally correctly for to account for X, Y, or Z. And so goes back to what you'll lose money over. We have to make the decision: are we going to do it right and lose some money on this aspect of the job, or are we going to cut corners to keep the bid? And it's like that's never an option, and the
Mm-hmm.
foreman knows that. And so whenever they're out there working, I've really ingrained in them, if there's two ways to do it, right and wrong, do it right no matter what. We'll
Mm-hmm.
we'll figure out the results and what we have to come up with afterwards. But let's
Yeah,
get it right.
we'll learn this lesson for next time.
Exactly.
Yeah,
At the end of every job, we sit down and we say, okay, what did we learn? What did we learn? And then we take notes on that, and then we be sure that it doesn't happen again.
next time bid 7 extra hours to complete this task because we forgot.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right. So
Travis, you've been quiet. That's unusual.
What are you saying?
I don't think we've let them talk. We've just been
No,
going.
I mean, I think it ties back into like, and there's so many common themes and stuff that we talked about, like developing a family, developing culture. Leadership definitely plays a part in that. I know that in circumstances when on both sides of it. So being a leader and having a team and measuring performance and meeting deadlines and holding to standards. If you've done it appropriately, where you've been a great leader, you develop that culture where you trust each other. You know the team there cares about each other, wants to do the right thing. You built the right team too. You know where their heart is. You know that they genuinely are wanting to do the right thing. And when you go to them, so for like the tough conversations, when you go to them, it makes it a little bit different conversation. Out of one is I know the times where I got into a lot of trouble as a leader is when I became disconnected from what was actually happening, and I came in with assumptions that weren't necessarily true, but I wasn't staying close to whatever was happening. So I truly didn't understand what was going on. So uh, that later tempered my approach to it in that I knew who they were, I knew where their heart was. They truly did want to do the right thing, and maybe there was a misunderstanding of where I thought was going on. And so when I approached the conversation like that, truly out of a place of caring them as a human, and then knowing that maybe there's something missing if things aren't happening the way that they should, I know that's not what their intent was. And usually that dialogue and get back on track and having that good relationship was just a pivot. Then it was understanding and then working together. And then the flip side on times where maybe I've been that person, so I know where I fall into challenges is I'm an A-type personality. I like to take on everything, figure it out. I'll take on more than what I potentially can, and like I'll just figure it out. Even things that I've never even done before, I'll go headlong into it. I'll freaking learn it. And I developed kind of a career of doing that. And a lot of times, especially in the areas where maybe I haven't done it before, where it takes longer, maybe I miss timelines or I miss uh, those tough conversations. I feel horrible that I've had to have them in my career. I feel horrible that I put that leadership in that position, that we are even here. And that becomes a learning point for me, is leadership not only happens from the top down, but it happens from the bottom up. Communication's critical. Leading yourself too. If things aren't happening appropriately, leadership happens at yourself, the people around you, across, down, and up. Of if there's an incongruency, and things aren't happening the way they should, maybe the plan slid or we're not achieving whatever we had set out to. Um, if I'm putting my leadership in a position where they don't understand what's happening, and we've gotten to the point where something slid, that's an ownership on my part. I didn't effectively communicate, hey, what was happening before there was a mismatch. I put that on myself. So the leadership thing, the community that you build, the people that you're around, the team that's there, and the leadership starts with yourself. But leadership doesn't always just have to happen from the top and whoever's the CEO or the manager or the boss. You lead yourself, you lead the teams around you, but you also lead up too, in the sense that's typically in the form of communication and continuing that relationship. And if things are a mismatch in either way, it's typically communication. It, it could be the team, it could be things, but as long as you know that the team and the individuals on your team are like-minded, that they care about, they want to do the right things, then it's typically a result of lack of communication, a lack of leadership on multiple levels, not just in one direction.
I like that because I think our society now likes to put a lot of emphasis. So I heard a speech not too long ago from someone that's more in the safety field. So with our business, safety is a huge part in the industry and in house. But the person had talked about, so like a lot of the whole safety movement the last 10 years or so has almost been, let's say I'm an employee in the field, and let's say, Travis, you are a safety director. So it's almost too much of a reliance that I am looking to you for all of my judgment. You basically tell me what to do when it comes to safety. Travis, please. But what that does is it's also taking the self responsibility I should have to lead myself, to be safe myself without you. You're providing a guidance. But anyway, so this what the speaker was talking about was you can't take all of that away from them. They should have, and you should be hiring people who are naturally going to figure that out themselves a little bit, that they want to work on a safe job site. They're not going to rely on Travis 100%. They want to just be safe. Um, they'll look to Travis for certain examples of safety. But anyway, taking this back to more leadership, that's correct too. And what you're saying, I think, is you also have to have the right people that realize, yes, the leader is important, but I actually also owe that person honesty because they can't make the right decisions if they don't have the whole story. I've seen that before where the leader thinks, hey, I got all this data, I can make a decision based upon this data, but the data is faulty. And maybe that goes back to him, or him or her leading a company to where people are afraid to be honest and direct with him, where they're afraid to come to him. Or maybe that's a hiring issue where they hired the wrong people or whatever it is. But, every person has to bring forth the full, transparent, honest truth, or the leader's not doing their job. And a lot of that does sometimes come down to, I think, where the leader's unapproachable. And I look back at like my time as leader at Lanner Corp. There's been several times where some of our core guys, I was actually the first person they called at times. Like, hey, I just messed up. What do I do? Where sometimes this is the last person they want to call because I'm also the one that signs their paycheck. And I love that I was the first one they called because number one, they trusted me to help walk them through it, and they weren't afraid to bring that to me. So
Right.
I think that's a huge thing in leadership too. And I'm going to tie that back to safety now. One of the reasons at LanderCorp I think that safety is better here than it is other companies is because people are not afraid to actually bring us the near miss, the hey, that almost happened, or the safety concern that they have on the job site. Where we've worked for some companies where it's such a punishment model that nobody ever wants to bring anything forward. The customers we work for, not all of them, some of them, where people are just afraid to bring stuff to them. Well, guess what? You can't learn, you can't improve because you don't know, because people are afraid to come to you. So I think as a leader, we got to make sure too that we are calm, that people respect us enough to actually bring us the full story, whether that's in safety, whether that's a job site issue, an employee issue. Like, hey, this dude's not representing Arrow Valley or Lander Corp or whatever on the job site. Like, they may act this way in the office when they're around you, Tucker, or around you, Travis, or whatever, but in the job site, they are rude to the customer. You've got to have that openness and honesty with your crew. So anyway, that's another leadership not on our list today, but that made me think of it, Travis, and you were bringing that up.
So there's but talking about leading yourself too. I I think leadership too. If we spent any time studying it, it typically gets connotation that it's a top down. But it's so important to view it as 360. But it starts with you. There's a man. I don't know if you call it a fable or what, but it's an old saying. I actually saw it as a poster somewhere, but it was talking about the tale of two wolves, or maybe, but it's some grandfather that was talking to his son and essentially said that, and I'm paraphrasing, but that there's essentially two wolves in all of us. And that one wolf represents like jealousy, sorrow, regret, arrogance, resentment, pride, ego, and then there's another wolf that's good that represents like peace, love, benevolence, generosity, integrity. And then the grandson looked up at the grandfather and said, so so if they're always battling and they're inside of you, which one wins? And his response just like the one you feed. um,
Hmm.
and and ultimately that what we focus on, what we choose to focus on, will prevail. And that starts with us. We choose what we focus on, for better or worse. We descend into sorrow and pity and self remorse and become bitter to ourselves and those around us. Or if we see the setbacks or the wins, don't let the peaks and valleys get too high, but always focus on what's positive. And I think it was maybe part of our previous conversation too, of who do we surround ourselves with? What content do we surround ourselves with? Feed the wolf that's good. Whatever we
Mhm.
focus on, whichever wolf we feed, that's what's going to materialize in our life. But that starts with the leadership of yourself.
Sure, yeah. John Maxwell calls it the law of the lid. It's the first law in the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. He's like, if you're here, you can't lead people past here. He's like, you've got to come to here if you want to lead them, and any higher than what you are. And part of that is teaching them to lead themselves and teaching them to lead others. So, like you said, 360 approach. But you're never going to lead someone past where you are. So you are the lid of your organization.
There's another. It's called the Peter Principle. So this is, it can be good or bad. It's typically results in bad. It depends on who this affects. But the Peter Principle, in that we're promoted to the level of incompetence, and that you take somebody who's a high performer in a certain area and you continue to promote them to a position where they're no longer competent, in that you've given them scope or responsibility or team or areas beyond what they've ever achieved before, and they plateau out. uh, and I think that there's two paths well, maybe three, but it really is, it's either ascension or descension. When the person gets to that plateau, where they're now uncomfortable and they haven't charted this ground before, they either stay stagnant, which really isn't stagnant. They start to descend. They cover out. They cover what they can, but things typically start to destabilize whatever they're responsible for. Or they ascend, and that's typically a result of them realizing, man, I'm somewhere where I haven't been before. and I need to learn. I need to grow. I need to absorb, start influencing things in my life where I understand or I can excel. One, compensate for the deficiencies where I'm at and be able to achieve at this level. But then how do I take it to the next step? How do I start to win here where I've never been before? But that Peter principle, it's kind of an unrealized thing. We don't typically see it because it happens in the background where we promoted that person in our organization to that period, and then we just wonder like, well, damn, what happened? Like they were a star performer. Maybe you put them into an area where they haven't been before, and uh, it's not. I mean, it could be other things too. There could be other personal things or whatever that's affecting that. But when we're looking at purely from a business or contextual standpoint, to be cognizant of what are the attributes that they have, what skills do they have, where have they been, what will they do when they hit adversity? Will they shrink or will they rise? And helping maybe coach them through that, or understanding that's that personality that they'll work through that. But that's something that typically affects growing organizations specifically. That it doesn't matter what the industry is, but it really depends on that self leadership too. Realizing if you are that person where the Peter principle is in effect in that you've now been put into a position where you're out of your depth, essentially. What do you do? And it comes down to self leadership.
I like that. It's kind of basically you are responsible for you at the end of the day. You know what I mean? But I think it kind of can tie back to what we talked about in other episodes, is that continuous improvement, self improvement. As a leader, like you said, Tucker, if you lead an organization for 40 years and you started the bar here, and then you grow people to that. But if you don't continue to grow yourself, those people, can't continue to grow with you. And I think if you're, like you said, Travis, someone is promoted into a position, you're like, man, this is actually a little tougher than I thought. They will either ascend or descend. But I think having that approach that, hey, I am now in this position. Now I have stuff I got to learn. And hopefully I can lean on my boss to do some of that, and the boss will provide it. Or maybe I just need to, dig into some podcasts, dig into some books. But I have learning I need to do and continuously learn to develop, my little group of people that I'm in charge of. So I think, again, self-improvement, the drawing a blank, but anyway, growing oneself and constantly pushing to learn is just, I don't know, to me, that goes out throughout all areas of life, whether that's fitness, faith, family, leadership, whatever it is. The moment you become stagnant is the moment you die. You stop right there. So anyway, just a thought whenever you were talking about that, Travis. Any final thoughts, guys, as we wrap this one up?
Man, I think it's our duty to be the best version of ourselves, and that's for others. Like, even if you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for those who depend on you.
Yeah, I think that's good.
I like that.
Travis, what about you? Any final closing thoughts?
Nuggets
of wisdom.
You know me. I mean, you said it yourself. We can talk. We're already pushing an hour. No, like, I mean, this is it's so important. And I think everything we're talking about comes down to the human piece too. Ownership personally, ownership of our organizations, 360. I mean, human performance, striving for excellence. I mean, those are all kind of human traits and human characteristics. Want to be the best version, not only for ourselves, but everything around us, the people around us. I love what you just said there, Tucker. And we'll do more to avoid pain than to gain pleasure. And if we can reframe things in that manner, not necessarily for ourselves, because we might endure pain ourselves, but if we can view it as the pain and the hardship that people around us will endure, if we aren't our best self, can maybe be a better motivator. But yeah, it comes.
Man, Travis, you just throw in these little quotes and just keep on rolling.
He's a quote master, man. He's a quote master.
He's good, man. That's good. Do people do more to avoid pain than they do to gain pleasure? I like that.
It's like a dominant human characteristic. I mean,
yeah,
and it's very true, unfortunately. But yeah.
When I say I like that, I guess I like the quote. I don't necessarily like the implications.
yeah. No, and I think to kind of wrap things up too, there's people need to understand the difference between leadership and management. They're two completely different things to me. Leadership is more like you said, Travis. It's more the human element. It's the leading by example, caring about others, building that culture, being the vision setter. It's about the human element of, well, it's leadership. Management to me is more of the strategy behind the scenes. Hey, we need our financials to hit these targets. We need our KPIs to be here. If we do this, this, and this over the next 3 years, we acquire this company, we do this, we get this level of growth, hopefully. It's more of the strategy, the analytical side. And I feel like a lot of people think that's mainly what it is to work with a group of people, to be over them, is more than managerial. You got to have both. The managerial should help guide the vision, but then you've got to have the leadership to take that to the people and actually get them to buy in, actually get them to want to follow you. But then you've got to be genuine in all of that. And it can't just be, I'm here to achieve goals. I'm going to be this fake person to help get us there. You've got to actually care about these people. You got to actually be the example, not just at work, as a human being, be an example to where you gain their respect and you're actually helping them in their life. I think when you do those things, that's when you gain the respect. That's when people actually want to follow you because you're a human being worth following. And then that's when you can actually be the leader you want to be. And then hopefully you've got the managerial side, you've got the team in place there, the accountants and the lawyers and all those people to help this whole chess game move forward. But you've got to be the leader that people need. So thank you guys. Tucker, always a pleasure. Travis, always a pleasure. If you like the podcast, we don't charge for it. Please tell others about us, how it spreads. If you don't like it, turn it off. We'll see y'all next time.